Hello, welcome to the November 14th, 2023 Club Cubase live stream. My name is Greg Undo and I'm host of the live stream today. If you have not attended a live stream before, how it works is you can ask questions in the live chat field or simply send questions in advance to clubcubase@steinberg.de. When asking questions, if you could specify which level of Cubase you're running, so if it's Cubase LE, AI, Elements, Artist, or Pro, which version number, if it's 11, 12, 13, if it also, which operating system, if you're running on Mac or Windows, that information is helpful. Realize that my ability to answer questions in a real-time manner will soon be eclipsed, but we'll go through each of the questions chronologically as they were asked. So if you don't see an immediate response to your question, if we could avoid asking the same question over and over again, we'll get to the question kind of in order that they were asked. And if we should have an index of all the topics pinned to the top of the comments field today, at the top of the video, so you could just read a particular topic and jump straight to that point in the video that it's discussed. If you want to see topics that have been covered in previous live streams, you can go to cubaseindex.com, and we want to thank Jan from Stockholm for creating that website. We also have two people that serve as moderators. We have Agent K and Jazz Dude. They're not Steinberg employees. They just do it to kind of make it a better community, and we appreciate their efforts. And also, we will give a special kudos to Jazz Dude for his work with the Cubase Nation Discord, which is a wonderful resource of information for the Steinberg community. So once again, my name is Greg Undo. I work for Yamaha Corporation of America, which is the United States distributor for Steinberg products. I'm presenting from outside of Washington, D.C. area, from Alexandria, Virginia. I just got back from Boston this morning after presenting at Berklee College of Music last night, which is a lot of fun. And if you're watching this live, please feel free to introduce yourself and tell us where you're from. And with that, let's go ahead and get started. All right, so a lot of questions already. All right, so we have Home Studio World checking in from Jordan. Thanks for being on. And his question is, what about AI roles on mixing and mastering? Are there any future considerations for Cubase in light of extensive AI-related research to help people on mixing? Thanks. I'm sure that, there's lots of interesting technologies. I don't think that there's any mixing AI functions that are currently in Cubase, but obviously I think our development team is keeping an eye on different things. So I'm not sure if we'll see where you have a song and it'll be mix my track for me and, make it sound like Elliot Shiner or make it sound like Bob Clearmountain or make it sound like Frank Phil Petty or Chuck Ainlay. So I don't think there'll be kind of presets like that. I think each song will present kind of unique challenges and unique opportunities for a mix. So I think the best path currently is probably just to continue to always evolve your mixing skills and keep practicing and doing that. We see AI functionality kind of, within Cubase for, like the chord track, for scale assistant, for, doing very audio, for, generating harmonies. We see a lot of AI functionality inside of spectral layers for its algorithms. So, but nothing currently that does it for mixing or mastering. So, and some people think that they're great and some people think that they're awful. So it's, so it's an interesting time, but obviously Steinberg is generally on top of things, but we don't want to necessarily have AI for the sake of just having a marketing buzzword, but would rather have it be something that's beneficial to users. All right, another question from Home Studio World from Dr. Eichmann. Thanks, Greg. What's the best way to reduce CPU overload during composing? Freeze function or rendering? Thanks. So they really kind of give you the same capability. So when you freeze a track, so if we had a MIDI track here, we could freeze the track and that would render it as an audio file and offload the instrument. And when we do a render in place, the rendered file, we can turn it into an audio event, and they kind of seem like at that level to be very similar. A frozen file can't be edited. So if you want the flexibility of before, you think of, you'd freeze a file when you know that perhaps all of the MIDI edits that you need to do on it are done. Because once it's frozen, you would have to unfreeze it to edit it, and then refreeze it again to alleviate system CPU resources. Whereas a rendered file, you can disable the track and enable it to render it, or just simply have the rendered file muted, which is the default behavior. So when I could just say, okay, like I want to take this. If we freeze it, kind of, leaves it frozen in that state. But if we need to have the flexibility to alter it afterwards, that's when we could go into our render settings. And at this point, I could say, okay, I want to render that. This track is muted, or this event here is muted. But if I need it to change a couple of notes here, say, I had to get rid of that. At that point, we can choose to, without having to, unfreeze it, refreeze it. To do that, I could still make edits in the event. But really kind of gets you to the same place of being able to offload those CPU resources. When you do a render in place, it gives you this flexibility, but you might have to also come over here and disable the track, whereas that's kind of all done within a particular frozen event. So if you need to edit afterwards, render in place has its advantages. If everything is perfectly set in stone and you know that you don't need to do any more edits on that, then freezing. All right. Okay, so we see also from Home Studio World, many thanks. Where is the monitor button on track? It seems to be invisible to me. So if you come over here, depending on, I'm not sure if it's make sure that that you have this, the height set. And there are kind of different presets that you could use. So let's say if you have it set to simple or standard, it could be that once we're mixing, that the monitor button is turned off. So if you just kind of come here, there's different presets for track control settings. So let's say I want my standard, and let's say I like the abbreviated set. I switch this to mixing. You could, go to just right click on a particular track, and you could go to your track control settings. So as we come over here, we'll just choose track control settings, and then you could see which items are hidden and then move those over. And you could do that for instruments, sampler tracks, MIDI, etc. So at this point, we could just have those particular functions. So if you don't see it, make sure that, maybe you have it switched to a particular to a preset here. And like if you go to mixing, you don't need to record, enable, or monitor since you're not tracking at that point. But it could be just as simple as clicking here and saying go to standard, and then you'll see the standard controls appear. All right, so we have from Vishnu in India, says Cubase 12 Pro user. I've been using a record mode, which will monitor and enable the track as I select. The drawback is when I export the track, and if it is still selected, the output would not be having any sound. Which recording mode do you recommend in order to avoid this? So, it could depend on what tracks are selected. Now, if you wanted a quick way, before you do this, you could create a project logical editor preset. So if you're not familiar with this, if you have tracks like monitored or record enabled and you go to export, they can often show up blank because you're telling it to monitor an external source. But let's say I have multiple tracks here that are record enabled, and before I export, I just monitored. So before, if I wanted to get rid of that, I could just go and create a project logical editor preset. So we'll come over here to our project logical editor. Setup, so I want to say our container type is equal to track. And then on our event transform actions, we could say, I think it's under track operations, and we will choose monitor, and we could choose to disable. So I have these 3 tracks that are set to monitor. So I could just run this project logical editor preset. And if you have thousands of tracks, you could just click that and that will disable the monitor, or record, and you could do the same thing for record as well. So if we say track operation, and we'll say record, disable. So let's say I have this, every other one here. I could just choose to get rid of the record and monitor functions on all tracks just like that. So, and then you could just have a keyboard shortcut and to access that one particular function for you, Vishnu. All right, so we see from the Monk Beats, Cubase 13 main mixing console. Is it possible to have different view configurations, each one with different sections? For example, one wave channels and inserts, 2 group channels and sends and EQ only. So I think that we still need to have, just turn it off my Mac, that we still need to have like the faders visible. But let's say if I'm here on my particular project, and we'll just go ahead and close a bunch of these. So let's say I want to see my waveforms here. All right, so let's say I'll just right click here. We'll just get to my different mixer settings. So let's say I wanted to only see so I'll take off the EQ curve at top. So let's say I want to, and let me just read the question here again so I get the correct settings. All right, so let's say you want the wave channels and inserts only. All right, so let's see if we could get this set up. Okay. Okay, so let's save this as a configuration. So we'll come here, let's add, we'll call this inserts. Okay, and let's see if the next scenario is going to be group channels and sends and EQ only. All right, so let's come over here. I want to filter all of my, let's say I have group channels. I'll add some group channels in my project here. Okay, so we'll have groups, and let's say it's going to be EQs, group channels, sends, and EQs. So let's come here. All right, so now we'll save this as added configuration. We'll see if this works. Groups, EQ, and sends. Okay, so now let's come over here. Let's get to our inserts. So now we only see inserts and waves, all my tracks. I want to only see groups, EQ, and sends. So that way you could have different channels, different functions kind of all set up. But I think it still is going to, be coupled with the faders as well. So let me know if that's helpful for you. All right. All right, so we see from Alexander Plasko. Hi, Greg. Any idea if Karma software will work with the new native montage synth when it comes out or thereafter? So I haven't heard anything. I've just heard that the montage synth is coming out, but I could check with one of my colleagues. I could reach out to him later today after the live stream or tomorrow to see if I can get an answer on that. And I'll try to make a note of it to have an answer for Friday, Alexander, if you want to ask me, or send me an email to clubcubase@steinberg.de. But I haven't kind of been brought into discussions. It's interestingly enough, the Steinberg within our organization in Yamaha Corporation of America, we're in the pro audio group, and synthesizers is a different group. So I don't necessarily, I'm not necessarily involved with meetings with them as much. All right, we see Uno Memento checking in from Finland. Glad you could make it today. And he has Cubase 13 installed. It says after a couple weeks he will have learned everything. So that's good. You could teach me things. All right, sorry. Okay, so we see from Zephaniah, I believe from Detroit, if memory serves. Is it possible to turn the automation up or down in the inspector on a 2-bar part without using the range tool, using Artist 10 on PC? So let's say if I have like this particular drum loop, and I want to do automation. So let's say I have 2 measures here. So we would have to manually automate. So let's say we're at this particular event. So I'm going to come here. Let's solo. And I'll just come here so that we'll listen to this. And I won't adjust the panning accidentally. So let's say, like, while this is playing, I could automate, just clicking on right. So let's say I want the second 2 bars to be down. I could just say, okay, let's automate here. So you could manually do it, and that may not be kind of as accurate as you want, but you could just write the automation there. When we do this, it's not going to set necessarily, this is going to be a dynamic, like a dynamic fader. So even if we go to, like in 13, if we go to our fader here, this is still kind of moving, in the advantage of using the range tool. If you open up the automation, so, you could manually do it, but if you just select 2 events and then do it like that, that's a pretty clean method of doing the automation like that. So that's why I think a lot of people do that, because they could snap the selected range to events if that's critical for you. If not, you could just automate directly from the particular, from the fader as expected, and just kind of click here. So while you're automating, so that's ways you could do it. But if you wanted that to be, super precise, if that was critical for you, then, it may make sense to use the range tool, but you could definitely do that. Lots of people have automated that way for a long time. All right, wonderful to see Stefan from Sweden. And we see Monk Beats, just happy to be back live, so we're glad to see you back on. It says he's happy to be, he hasn't been on live in many months, but he always watches the whole video and playback. All right, great to see Nick on. All right, so we see from Cycling is Awesome. Hi, Greg. What is the best way to tune a kick audio in Cubase? The transpose function changes the sound of the kick dramatically, even if I change it only 1/2 step. Thanks. So there are different like algorithms for changing So it could be, so let's go take a look. I'm not sure if it's a live, like a live drum or like a programmed drum beat, but let's say if it's kind of live setup here. So let's say I have 3 kicks here. So if I select these events, we could just transpose. So that's down an octave. And when you come over here, you could try different algorithms. And if it's going to be kick, you may want to just, you could experiment. Usually time would be a good place to start, and that would be for more rhythmic. But if you're noticing kind of anomalies, you could also just come right over here and use the pitch algorithm. So if you could let us know how you're transposing it, that would be helpful. But, I think that sounds fine for as you're going down to be able to go down an octave and still be able to use it. Wonderful to see Michael Marshall from Somerset in the UK, and David Griffiths checking in from North Wales, UK. So we see from David Griffiths, he asks, there's been some dissatisfaction with new color scheme. I wonder if there will be an update soon to address visibility issues. So, when I first went to it, and I understand everyone's reaction because I had kind of the same reaction to it initially, but now for me, I like the visibility options, and some people, like at first to me it was like, oh, it's really bright, but now when I go back to Cubase 12, to me it looks very kind of demure, and it's not as clear. So I think, I'm not sure if it's going to go back to the color schemes of before. There's a lot of, kind of GUI conventions that have been worked out to make sure that the inspectors are visible and a contrast is good, because when I had raised some issues, one of the people at Steinberg actually went through with like this little tool. They said, and went with contrast. I said, oh, it'd be nice if this was dark instead of white. And he's like, well, actually, that's, the contrast between that is lower than white, and that's why we went with that. So I think that, for me, I felt I had a lot of the same initial reactions, but now I don't want to go back to the previous one. I think this is clearer and easier to see. I don't have the best eyesight as well, so. Okay, so we see from Dallas LaRue, just says, in Cubase 13, the inserts are not sounding in listening mode. I believe Cubase 12, the inserts sounded, but the sends didn't. So let's go ahead and come over here. Let's take a listen to, we'll just put a quick. All right, so I'm going to put an insert on the bass here. So let's just put something obvious. I'll just do flanger. All right, so. All right, so we'll come over here. Let's say we go to listen. All right, and let me just. All right, so right now my inserts, I hear the flanger when in listen mode, but make sure that you have this little button here, and you can see this in the main. You may have to kind of click on the main button here, and then you could just activate the use after fader link, and that's probably what's not set, just that one button. So now we could hear the inserts when in listen mode without that turned on. So give that a try. So again, go to the control room. What we want to do is, if you don't see kind of the listen settings, click on the main tab, and that will expose them from the bottom, and then make sure that this icon here is orange. And then you should be able to hear your inserts. All right, Justin Williams says, hey there, do you know when the trial will be available? I would love to test it. I'm on Cubase 12 Pro Mac Ventura. So it's usually 4 to 6 weeks after the initial release. So that would put it maybe, early December-ish. So that's generally how, what the time frame is for that. All right, so we have Value, just happy to be on the Cubase party, saying hi to Greg and to all the Cubase family around the world. And he's based in Vienna, Austria, not Australia. But apparently there's an Australia part of the airport in Vienna. All right, so we have, I guess it's Buchan from Switzerland. Buchan, thanks for joining us on the live stream. All right, and we have Beltram checking in from Sweden. And Sam K from France, thanks for being on today and joining us this evening for you guys. All right, so we see from Nick Saya, hi Greg, the download assistant never opens for me. I always have to do manual installs. Any fix for this? I'm on Monterey on a Mac 2019 Pro Tower. So I've never had any problems with the download assistant. Make sure that, one of the things that you could try to do is to, make sure that if you, that it is kind of tied to your particular account. But I've never kind of run into problems, running on kind of multiple Mac computers. But if you want to reach out to me at clubcubase@steinberg.de, I know I get emails from you, so you can reach out and I could do some more research on it. But does anyone else have problems with the download assistant not working? So maybe you could leave a comment. All right, wonderful to see Taylor from Music for World Peace Records from Pine Grove, Pennsylvania. Always brings fond memories of family from that area. So it's great to see you on, Taylor. All right, and we have Fred Robinson from Norwich in the UK. He says, hoping I'm well, so great to see you. Fantastic to see Vinny Sabatino from Orlando, Florida area. All right, and Vinny says he's on Cubase Pro 13. He says, first thing I notice, it seems to be slowing me down. I get the hourglass every time I do something. Help. So let us know if you're on Mac or PC. And if you're on Mac, let us know if you're running it in Rosetta or native mode. So it could be plugins, that if you're running in Rosetta, that could be slowing you down as well, instead of running it native for Apple Silicon. All right, so Taylor from Music for World Peace Records asks, is it possible to A-B the channel strip EQ like you can with inserts? Let's give it a shot. So let's say we want to come over here. Oh, get rid of my beautiful flanger. All right, so let's go ahead and we'll just solo the bass here. So let's say we want to go to our channel setup. All right. All right, so I'm just right clicking here. So let's say I want to switch to B setting. And then just right click in the faders here. And then we could say switch to A setting. switch to B setting. And I think that we could even do this in, let's say if we just right click here, like in the pop-up EQ, you know, we could just switch to A setting, switch to B setting. So just right click in the channel strip, and then you should be able to have the channel EQ do that for you to save the A and B, similar to what you do with the inserts. All right, so we have Larry B checking in from a surprisingly warm Brampton, Ontario. So thanks for being online. Always great to have our Canadian friends on. All right, and we have Michael Masakowski checking in from Poland. Thanks for being online today or this evening. All right, we see Sam K is on Cubase Pro 13. Glad that you updated. See, Larry B just says, just did the upgrade to Cubase 13 Pro. I was surprised that the most recent project list was preserved. Thank you. So, I think there's been less issues of migration of settings from previous versions. All right, so we see, hi, just a question. It says, hi, advise me how to recognize my voice in Cubase. So let me know if you're wanting to do like voice commands for Cubase, or if you wanted to be able to record your voice. So if you want to record your voice, what you want to do is make sure that you go to your, your studio setup and that you have it set for the correct audio interface that's connected for your system. And we want to go to the audio connections and go to the inputs tab, and we want to define an input, and it may default to just a stereo input. So let's say we have one stereo input. It may default to that. But you could also add a bus. With your voice, it's generally going to be like one single microphone. Since there's a single source, we will choose a mono input. We say let's go to input 1, and as we go to add an audio track, we could right click in this list here, go to add audio track, and we could choose our mono in. So we could just say, okay, we want to just choose our mono in that we created, or whatever audio interface connections that you have here. If it is a condenser microphone on your audio interface, you'd probably want to activate phantom power, because you may not hear it until you have phantom power, and then make sure that you have monitor enabled here, and then just hit record, and that's how you could record your voice in. But let me know if it's recording your voice, or if it's you wanted to do voice control. You can say Cubase stop, Cubase play, stuff like that. All right, so we see, and Michael also asked, how to stop playing notes from the event that is being trimmed. Notes go beyond events and are played anyway by playhead. All right, so let's say we have a synth sound. So let's come here to instrument. All right, so let's say I just have on this instrument track, all right, so let's say we add an event here. I'll just go record something. All right, so now if we want to trim this particular event, as we do this and we hit play. So that note is still that long, and I think what we need to do is go to your preferences, and let's say you go to editing to MIDI, and if we activate this little mode here called split MIDI event, so now if I cut the particular event here, that will cut the MIDI note. So I'm going to now just erase that particular event. And as we do this, that is going to send a note off message. So come here, instead of trimming, so split the event, and that will split the particular MIDI note. Go to your preferences, editing MIDI, and just make sure that split MIDI events is checked there. Otherwise, that note will continue to play onward because the note is still there and it hasn't sent a note off message. Okay. All right, so we see, just as John Barry just asked, hi Greg, my shortcut to AB in the channel EQ does not work in a pop-up window. Could you try it and see if it's just me doing something wrong? Cheers. Okay, so let's give it a shot. Come here. All right, so I'm gonna just assign like an AB function here in my MIDI remote. Just see if it's find a function here quickly. See if it's maybe under toggle AB. Toggle AB setting. Okay, so I'm gonna come here, switch to B setting. Doesn't look like that is kind of, I'll try it with an insert just to make sure it's not the particular function. So I can see it working there, but I don't see it working in the pop-up window. Let me just try the channel setting here, just for my own curiosity. Yeah, so it works there, but not here. So while that's open, it works. Let me close this window. Yeah, so it doesn't look like that's working. I'll make sure to mention that. And thanks for bringing that up, John. Appreciate that. All right, great to see Braxel checking in from Texas. All right, so Jason Grove says, "Hey Greg, greetings from Kentucky. Is there somewhere in the preferences I'm missing to change the Alt plus Shift clicking solo button back to previous versions? Now goes to solo defeat." So if you could let me know, so let's go take a look at solo. So let's say if I do Alt Shift on solo, that does the solo defeat. So Jason, if you could just remind me of what the behavior was before, if that was doing it across kind of multiple tracks to do, like if you wanted to solo multiple tracks. I remember I saw something on like a Facebook post about this. I think Carlos Marino had posted it. So, but let's see if we. So if you wanted it to, if it's with multiple tracks, and if you wanted it to not do solo defeat but to solo, so let's come over here, and let's say in the mix console, I'll just activate quick link. Then you could solo. But I think that there is some workaround. I could review it if you want to. I could check it out. If you want to email me at clubcubase@steinberg.de. Okay, so we see from VXLA. Thanks for the stream. Do you have any suggestions for home? Excuse me. Any suggestions for home studio drummers who want to use the same EQ settings for their projects as a starting point? What's the Cubase way to do this? All right, so let's say we are here and I like the particular plugins that we have. I'll just revert. So, we could set this up. So let's say I like how all of my drums are dialed in currently now. So I'm going to come select and to say this is our studio drum kit. I'm going to come right over here and we could right click and we will just save a track preset. So as we do this, we're going to say, let's call it VXLA. Okay, so we'll hit OK. And let's say at this point, if I've now modified and, changed lots of EQ on different sources, and I've changed all of the levels, and let's say if I flipped, the phase on different tracks, stuff like that we could do very easily. So let's say, okay, now I want to come over. I'll just activate this real quick. Let's get to our pre-section. And let's say on this snare track here, I want to have the phase, the polarity reversed. So if I wanted to now take this, we could go over to the media bay. And a lot of times you could start off with that as a template is one way, but you could also just come over here and go to user presets. It will say track presets multi, and as soon as we do that, we'll see VXLA. And if we're just kind of starting a new project, we'll just come here. Okay, we'll create empty. So again, we'll go to user presets, track presets, multi, VXLA, drag it over, and then all of our settings will automatically be carried over just like that. And then you could start your project with all your EQs, polarity settings, plugins if you wanted to as well. All right, wonderful to see Razel from Denmark and Brian Sawyer Sr. from Beulahville, North Carolina. All right, and we have Spike Williams checking in from Wales. Glad you can make it this evening. So Fred Robinson asks, I have Nuendo 12 and Cubase 12 now. I guess I should stop upgrading Cubase and just upgrade Nuendo from now on, or when I upgrade Nuendo, does the Cubase upgrade come with it, as Cubase is a subset of Nuendo? So if, they are going to be two separate programs, I think functionally, if you had to go forward with only choosing one, it's going to, the Nuendo upgrade may make more sense to continue because that will give you more features. But even though Cubase, we could think of it as all the Cubase features are inside of Nuendo, like when they become parity. So like, Cubase 12, Nuendo 12. Nuendo 12 will have all the Cubase 12 features. Nuendo 13 will have all the Cubase 13 features. I would speculate that as soon as you do that, it's going to carry forward and have all of the features, but it's going to be still separate upgrades because they are separate licenses. Okay, so we see how to export MP4. So if you want to do it, with the audio, we could do MP3, so it's not going to do MP4 AAC. But if you wanted to, if you had a video file, we could export video and have the video export to MP4 for the video. But you could take it into Wavelab and do the export. You could also, take there's a zillion utility programs that could do it easily as well. All right, so we see from values, says question in a mixer view, F3, I always need to check the insert section to see inserts, even if I saved this already in workspaces and templates. So, I think that templates and workspaces will, contain like the window, but not necessarily the specific contents within this. So if let's say we go to our, hate that Mac OS function. All right, so let's say I just want to see, come over here. We'll just do, say, routing pre-inserts. We'll just kind of do the whole shebang here. Okay, so I think that the workspaces are intended to, so let's say I come here and I save a global workspace. So we'll come here, let's add a workspace, we'll make it a global, and I'll just say value mixer. Okay, so if we come there, so now I'm going to close this setting, but let's go to our mixer here. So we go to our workspaces, and we could say, okay, so I'm going to go to the value mixer. So we jump there, but I'm going to remove some of the components, such as, let's say, inserts, EQ, strip, and sends. All right, so now when I recall this, we could open up the mixer, and I think that it's not necessarily the configuration, the workspace is kind of the window, with where it's lined up, but not necessarily the contents within the window. So we may have a workspace that's for the key editor, and you open up this particular event, it may go to the key editor positioned a certain way, but it may not open up this same exact selection of MIDI notes within the key editor. So this opens up the window, and we think the workspace is going to open this up, but it may not open up the contents of this. So if you're starting off, maybe if you're starting from a template where those are included and enabled, that would work. But the workspace is just going to be kind of like the mixer window, but not necessarily the contents within that window, because it's going to be fairly dynamic. So, and if you wanted to do that, again, start with a template or just come over here and save mixer configurations like we just showed a little earlier. Okay. So you see from Vishnu, just says, thank you so much, Greg. I still have to work more on a project logical editor, endless possibilities. Yeah, so yeah, there's a lot of great stuff in there. So, right, so Neil Conway says that Miss Priss says that you have to smash the like button, and that would be prudent. So we don't want to irritate her. All right, sorry, my chat field just jumped on me. Let me see if I can get back. Lots of questions. All right. Okay, so you see, hi Greg, how to stop MIDI notes from playing with the event is being trimmed. Event ends before note ends, playhead. Okay, so we covered that already. Okay. All right, so you just see a question in the next version of Cubase can appear convenient specialties. Yeah, maybe if you could let me know what, I guess, the convenient specialties are, that we could pass it along. All right, so wonderful to see Gareth on from Spain. Glad you can make it today. And we see that Michael Teams is on. All right, so we have 3/4 of Hot Mess on. All right, so we see from Bob Lynn, hi Greg Company, I have SSL Native Essentials and Modo Base. Both are not recognized by Cubase 13. Unfortunately, I have Mac Sonoma installed. Any hope of these working? Thanks. So make sure, one, that, it could be if you're running the VST2 versions and you're running in Apple Silicon mode, you would probably need to run the VST3 version. So make sure that you're running the VST3 versions. Or you could see if it changes if you run it in Rosetta mode. I believe that both Modo Base and the SSL, I recently just got a bunch of the SSL plugins myself for my personal studio, and they all seem to be running VST3. But if they don't work in Sonoma, you could reach out to SSL and to IK Multimedia to see if there's any issues, but it could be, make sure that you're running the VST3 versions and not the VST2. But they, outside of that, there's not much that we could do if they're not supporting, I'm pretty sure that both of them are doing VST3, and but if they haven't supported Sonoma, it's not much we could do for them to do that. So. Let's see, Gareth asks, hi Greg, could you show us your preferred project logical editor actions, including the ones you've created for yourself? So I probably don't make many for myself. I haven't done a lot of projects because Gareth and Michael Teams haven't written some new songs for me to play on. But a lot of times I make project logical editor presets, in live streams. I don't really have like a particular preference for them. I mean, it could do a tremendous amount of things, like of colorizing, different tracks, and some of the things in the Project Logical editor that I appreciated. We can think of it as kind of like a super, an intense macro in a sense, because we could come over here and we go to the setup. You could have sections that are so I need to do these 4 conditions before we do a logical editor, and then come over here and be able to do post commands as well. And each of these pre and post commands could be a selection of macros as well. So nothing really kind of comes to mind. Presets, let's just see if there's any that I thought were clever that we've worked on and created on live streams. Stuff like hide muted events on new track versions, colorizing events, renaming events. So if there's, just like being able to unmute and take off the mute and record enable on all the tracks in the project, that's helpful before rendering, so that you don't have to go through every single track. So none really come to mind. It's like, oh, what's your favorite book? And you haven't thought about it. But, I'm sure we'll probably do some more Project Logical editor things. I kind of make them not for myself, but to help others. So, all right. So we see Gareth is happy. Oh, and we see Pablo is on too. It's wonderful. Glad everyone can make it today from Hot Mess. All right. And we see Michael Teams is already distributing ice cream. Okay, so Patrick Manuel A, great to see you on from India, asks, while extracting root note to other track with MIDI logical editor, the root notes in the origin file disappeared. How to make it without losing data on origin file. All right, so let's take a look. Jump to a different project. Okay, so I'll just okay, so we want to basically take the low notes, like the root notes, and leave those in place and copy them to a new MIDI track. Logical editor. So let's come here. And I think we could just say, I think if we choose insert, let me just go through the all right, so let me just set it up here and we'll play around with it. So let's say we're going to take all right, so let's come here and say we want to take the property is set to or context variable, sorry. Okay, so when we come here, let's say we want, so we say insert. All right, let's choose extract. to track. I'll just, okay, so that extracted it down. Let me just move this all the way down. I'll just move this down with the low notes and the chord. All right, so say if we, all right, so the extract to tracks, that will place it right there, but you want those to be in. I think, you know, what you could do is come over here and choose copy. Yeah. Okay, so let's say we have our chords here. Let's just choose copy. So we're going to take the lowest note in the chords, copy, and that will place it into the low notes into the track and still leave the particular notes there. So you're going to use for the filter condition, copy, and then apply, and then the low notes are still there, and the low notes are now created into its own track. So give that a try, Patrick. Glad you could make it today. Okay. All right, so we see Pablo just says can't demo Nashville expansion for Groove Agent. Yeah, so not every particular sound library has a trial version. Sometimes people just use it for a project and keep getting trial versions of stuff. All right, everyone's happy to have Pablo, Gareth, and Michael Teams on. You see Nick Sai just says, as far as tuning kicks with electronic, if there is enough of a pitch and sound, I use Very Audio for like tuning a vocal, so that'll work as well. Depend on the sample that's being used. Okay, so we see Patrick Emanuel A asks how to make a macro for split all MIDI notes according to grid size. Like set up grid size to 16th, click long notes out according to grid size. I have a bunch of chords, so I want it to cut all at once. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's take these conditions here. Like we'll look at this particular event. All right, and this is one of the cool things you could do in 13 with kind of the range tool. So let's say let's create a macro. So we'll come here to edit and let's go to our key commands. So we'll do new macro. Okay, so let's say we want to set the grid value to 16th. Let's add that command. Okay, we want to then switch to range tool. We may want to start with the range tool. Okay, so we're going to have like maybe the range tool selected and set the initial one. Okay, so then we want to do split range. So I'm going to come here, Shift X. So we go to our keyboard shortcuts, Shift X, split range. So we're going to add that command, and we want to navigate right, add command. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to start off with my 16th note defined here. So I'm going to grab my range tool, and we'll just say, okay, we're going to make this 16th note. All right, so now what we could do is, and since we have the range tool in version 12, I'm going to come here, we're going to set the quantized 16th note, we're going to edit split range and navigate to the right. So let's say if I just run this particular macro, let me just, see if I come here, let's split the range. Let me just remove that function. Okay, yeah. All right, let me just switch this to velocity so we can see. Okay. All right, so I'm going to just come over here. Let's select just a 16th note in time. So we'll just take that particular selection. So that would be a 16th note, and then I could just run macro. And let's let me just make sure I have this. So, once we have this set, you can hit Shift X. And let me just make sure I have the grid. Just check my snaps value here real quick, sorry. All right, so once we have like this particular range, so I'm gonna like Shift X, split, Shift X, split, and let me just get my range. All right, so we could just come over here. Let me just, I think we just have our nudge value. Let me just check my nudge settings here. Make sure we have this. Okay, so we have our nudge value set here to 16th notes. So now, as we run this particular macro, we just should be able to basically hit Shift X to split. So we'll say Shift X, split. All right, so let's see if we have this and we choose to I'll just check this particular function, make sure I have the right function. All right, so I'm just going to hit the key. It seems like that should, let me just, but I could get the macro dot in, but you know, if you hit Shift X, that will split, Shift X, and then nudge over to the right. You can just kind of continue to split, and you can see that the notes will be split just there, so. Just try the macro from the beginning here, just make sure. Maybe we'll make sure that you see if the range tool needs to. Seems like that should be working as a macro, but even if we just come here and while I have this selected range, this is one of the good things with the range tool is to take that. So we do Shift X, nudge over to the right, Shift X, nudge to the right. Let's see if we can get this. I'll just try rebuilding the macro from scratch here. So let's say I want to be, let's go to the range tool. We'll make sure that is set. So I'll add that. Let's set it to Shift X to split the range. And then navigate right. Yep, so once we kind of come over here, so once we have that kind of set up, you can just, so maybe just adding the macro there at the beginning, but now you could have that one macro and just go to town like that. So try just, and that's one of the great things in Cubase 13 is being able to split using kind of the range tool. So give that a try, Patrick. Sorry, it took me a while to get there. All right, so we have freshly baked D&B. Just says just upgraded Cubase 13, so happy. All right. Thanks for letting us know, and enjoy your new version. All right, so Patrick Manuel A asks, is there a way to make automation to stay at the same place after change? For example, if I have to reduce a volume in a certain place, reduce their automation should come back to the original position. So I think it's just going to be kind of the standard constraint delay compensation. So let's say we have our automation point here. We'll zoom in. All right, so let's say right here in the middle we have an automation point, and I want it to adjust this automation point. I'll just put one in the middle here. All right, so I wanted to take this value, and if we hold down, I think it's Control. Now, as we move, I can move it up or down. So I could take a particular point and move this point. So right now, as just take my snap off here, just for showing this. Get it set up. Okay, so if we want to move a particular point, and we can do this in, same way with MIDI editors. Let's say I have this point. If we hold down, if I start to move it vertically first and hold down Control, it won't, let me just see if it's, get my correct. All right, so here I can move it kind of in time, and now I'm going to hold down Control or Command, and I'm going to move it vertically, and now it's kind of locking me in, so I can't move it in time. So this way, without Control, I could freely kind of move it, but once I hold down the Control or Command key and move it up or down, it will restrict me from changing the spot. So at that point, I can move it freely up and down and not worry about the value changing. Another method to accomplish this is you could select the particular event and just grab the info line and be able to, or the fader, and be able to adjust, that particular automation point. But try just holding down Control or Command, and then as you move it just vertically first, then it will lock it into its same position. Okay, so we have Michael Graybill asks, hi Greg, in the key editor on a CC lane, copy pasting a single value to an earlier point doesn't paste anything. Can you drag the existing one? But is there a setting somewhere to adjust this behavior? All right, so let's look at, let's say, a MIDI part here. Let's look, and we'll just say we'll go to modulation. I'll just make this larger so we can see it easier. Okay, so let's say I want my modulation to be here. Okay, so let's say if I copy this and let's paste it there. So I think it's going to have to have existing automation. So let's see if we come here and paste it. All right, so let's see if we grab just this. We grab our range selection tool, and I'm going to hold down Alt or Option, and we could move it like that. So let me know if you wanted to do. So we can copy the particular range. So even if we just are using kind of the object selection. So let's say if I come here, let's say that's copy this. Let's move it earlier in time. But if we select like with the range tool, and then come over here, you could just copy, or you can just move the events like that, copy the events like that. So maybe with the, let me know if you tried with the range tool in 13 just to be able to do that, if that's what you ultimately want to accomplish. See, Gareth is saying quadrifuzz plus reverence reverb equals better than any amp similar. Also slap the maximizer in there for some smooth tones. Yeah, quadrifuzz is a great tool. All right, so we see from Sam K, can we have the transport bar with only one bar instead of two? So I'm not sure if, let's say, if the transport bar is here, if you wanted to, so I'm not sure if it's like maybe the pre-count. So, we have kind of one line here that we could see for all of our different functions, but I'm not sure if it is for like the pre-count in, if it's, and that's where you could have maybe 2 bars. So let's say if I'm here and I go activate pre-count and I hit record, that it will, do 2 bars of count in. And I think if we go to, let's say, just our transport commands, that we could set it. Just find the, so we could say, just see if it's, maybe under metronome setup, sorry, that we could come over here, number of bars of count in, and we can set that to 1. So now when we go to record, we have 1 measure and then it counts in. So let me know if that's what you mean by the 2 bars. And again, go to transport to metronome setup, and then you can set the number of count bars for the count in from 2 to 1. Let me know if that's what you mean by that, Sam. Okay, so we see from Patrick, how to use the new MIDI editor. Tell us about all options. Tell us about the options, all parts or selected parts, and in track only. How to use these 3 options. All right, so let me just open up project here. So what's really great about kind of the new multi-part editing is it kind of takes the key editor from, like think of the paradigm of editing one particular event to editing like multiple events easily. So let's say I look at my bassoon, oboe. You can see that we have different parts here. So it used to be that we would double click on an event and that would launch us into our editor. So now with the new key editor, we can say, okay, we have all these events, and we have different options where you say, within the key editor, what are we? Let me just activate. So you can see our tracks now, and we could also just see kind of our different events here. So we could say, okay, we want to choose, let's say, we'll have different options. So you may notice that like this bassoon part has multiple events on that particular track. So instead of having to click on this event to see those ones, what we could do, let's say if we go to the horn part, is we could choose to, you may notice that we'll have different functions, as we start, you may see a little square here, and that would allow you to see all of the parts and be able to edit the parts on the particular track versus being limited to just the particular event. So that's kind of the idea of it, so that when we could double click and edit on that particular event, but if I wanted to see everything on the track instead of just being limited to seeing the particular event, I can now just come over here and click, and we could see all of the events on that track. So there's different options that make, so that when you start, it could automatically show all of the events on the track, because I want to, regardless of where I've made cuts, I still want to see those events all together. Okay. All right. Reading through comments. See Gareth, yeah. You see a comment, he hasn't tried the new black valve compressor. You should play with that. It's quite nice. All right, so Jason Cruiser's comment is, if you feel the need for AI to mix, where's the fun in audio engineering? That's a good perspective as well. All right, so Patrick Emanuel A asks, need a tip on key editor workflow method to edit multiple MIDI parts, and I wish to see all instruments but edit only one instrument or selected instrument. Why is there an I symbol? So again, if you're here, so let's say I want to edit everything in a folder, or now I only want to see, if I hold down Command and double click, we can now just see one particular event, and we could add different events just like this, so we could navigate back and forth. So that's how you could pick your different parts. And what's really slick about this, even if we're here, we can say, oh, I want to take this part. Let's say I'm only looking at my flute, and I wanted this flute event here because we could see the parts, and I want this to be copied over here. Just hold down your Alt or Option key, and we can see that we could move the container of the particular events and see those reflected within the MIDI editor as well. And if you want to come here, you could have different visibility settings. Maybe this is the eye you're referring to. So if you have I want to see visibility settings just for my brass, for my winds, for just violins, just for percussion, you could have your different visibility agents and use those visibility agents to see the editor contents as well. All right, so we see from Jazz Dude says, can you explain why Cubase now is unloading stuff before we end it? It's a bit annoying. Can we deactivate this check? Okay, so let me know what you're ending that's being deactivated, Jazz Dude. If it's when we go to different like when switching projects? Maybe if you could specify that for me so I could understand it a little better. All right, great to see Richard Michael on, just saying hello to everyone. All right, so Filter Freak asks, hi Greg, could you run through a few steps that you think might or could cause the folders in Halion 7 Media Bay to not show up? All 7,000 presets are there in a list, not instrument folders. Okay, so if it's, let me know if it is going to be over, like when we go to the media to VST instruments, and let's say we go to Halion 7, if these are the particular folders that you are not seeing, if these, these icons, and if you don't see those, I would go into your media bay, and you can do this by hitting F5. And if you don't see particular contents, what I would do is just kind of go through here, and if you don't, like, oh, I should see delicatessen, or I should see my let's say I want to see my Iconica sketch, that I would select that particular folder. And so if you see it here with all the sounds, I would at this point choose to rescan disk, and at that point see that. Now there's also could be a chance that there is a media bay component with your Cubase, and make sure that if you've updated to the latest version, that you have the latest media bay version, and that could synchronize between the media bay and Halion 7, so that when you do ratings in Halion, that it automatically updates here inside of Cubase as well. But try to make sure that, if you see it listed here of your 7,000 sounds, just try to rescan the disk, and that will probably take care of it for you. All right, so we just see question, music sheet will be imported. So we could do music XML or standard MIDI files that could be imported from other notation programs or other DAWs or MIDI sequencers. If you have like a piece of sheet music and you wanted to scan it into Cubase, Cubase doesn't do that directly. Generally, the results are less than satisfactory, and they're not, often you spend more time trying to reinterpret what, this scanning of the music. You're trying to reinterpret that and fix a lot of errors that just kind of perhaps didn't work so well. It seemed like it was a big thing about 15 years ago, scanning music, and most of the notation programs have kind of dropped support of it because it was very problematic. So Cubase doesn't have a tool to do that, but there are some tools, like some apps that you could, scan from your phone or like from an iPad, scan it and save it, export it as a music XML file that could be imported into Cubase. But if you're looking for scanning a piece of standard like written music, Cubase doesn't support that, but you can get apps that will do that and export as a music XML. And then in Cubase, come over here to import music XML file once you're in the score editor. All right, so we see my friend is trying to upgrade from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12. The download manager does not start. The message failed to launch. JVM and error invoking method will appear. Any idea what could be causing it? So it could be, because right now you're probably not updating to Cubase 12. It's going to do it from Cubase 11 to Cubase 13. But when doing Cubase 11 to Cubase 12, make sure that they have their USB-E licenser inserted, because it needs to it's a transition stage from Cubase 11 to Cubase 12. So it will need to migrate your Cubase 11 license to a non-upgradable Cubase 11 license. and that will be the last version that's that's available on the USB e-licenser, and that can be used to run previous versions of Cubase, going back to Cubase SX1. But make sure that they have the USB e-licenser and that they have their e-licenser software updated, because they'll have to kind of migrate their USB e-licenser license to the Steinberg licensing. So it could be that they maybe don't have the key inserted anymore, but that's part of the transition process, is to migrate that key to a new license, and then from there that will transition into the Steinberg licensing. All right, so we have Lawrence Koch checking in from Barn Door Recording in Rhode Island. It says, question on track visibility. Project window, mixed console synced. All tracks hide as you would expect. However, in the lower zone, I still see all my group tracks, and most should be hidden. So realize that the lower zone mixed console is independent of the settings. So, you could have different settings in the lower zone versus mixed console 1 versus mixed console 2, 3, and 4. So those are independent of each other. All right. Okay, so we see Patrick Mandeville A. How to recall and see swing amount once it's used. It's not showing next time. I want to be fixed and recall it when I want to adjust again. Is there an option? So once the MIDI data has been quantized, there it will reflect the quantization, but it's not necessarily going to indicate which calling it up later which value the swing percentage was. If that's something that you want to go back and be able to adjust at later, I would just come over here to the particular tracks and say, okay, I would make sure that you just go to the notepad, and like on the track notepad, you could just come over here, and as we come over here, you could just put it into, let's just make sure I have my notepad turned on. All right, let me just, and even if I'll just open this up and we'll see if the notepad is here, but just make just deselect the event here. Let's just see, but you can make notes on the particular tracks. Yeah, just get to the notepad here and indicate how much quantizations, what the swing percentage was, so you could go back. But once it's been quantized, it's not necessarily going to show you, a year later, oh, you did it to 50% versus 40%. Okay, so we see from Cross-Eyed Ask, got Cubase to remix / update multi-tracks exported from Tascam DP32. Best practice for importing templates for session. So, if you know that it's going to be, let's say, you did a live concert recording, it's basically going to be, the drum tracks are going to be similar, consistent, you use maybe, a couple guitar tracks, 5 vocal mics, whatever. At that point, once you have that set up, I would, just use a template. So you could just come over here. Once that is all configured, we will come to your file menu, and then you'll see save as template. And when you do this, make sure that, you're starting without any audio files in your template. So, go to your, delete all of your audio files. You could save it as a different project. So if I want to do this, so let's say I wanted to use this is like a template for a live recording. So what I want to do, just to keep this, I'm going to just do a save as, and we'll say, okay, so I'm going to save this under a different name. I will erase all of the audio files. So we'll come here, delete. I want to go to the pool, and so we go to media, to the pool window, so we still have all these audio files. And what I want to do is just come and say, remove unused files. We could move them, we could remove them from the pool, and then you could save this as a template. If you save a template that has audio files in it, those audio files will be loaded into every project that you start from that template. So kind of blow out the particular files in that template before saving it, and that way your template isn't accessing audio files that have very similar names. So a template is a great way to work with that. Okay, so we see from Sam K, says I was wrong. This is the bar head reading. Can I have a single bar? So maybe if it's like where we're looking at here, we see measure 25 to measure 27. So it could be, so if it's this that you're saying 25 to 27, maybe it's just going to be like as you zoom in, you can see, as let's say we zoom out, so we see measure 24, 25, 26. Now you see 24, 25, 26, 24, 25, 26. Now it's 25, 27. We zoom out. Okay, now it's going to be 25, 27, 29. As we keep zooming, now it's 25 to 29. Now it's, so now it's 25 to 33. So if you want to see each bar, you just may have to adjust the zoom factor. So let me know if that's it, Sam. Okay, so we see from Patrick Manuel, how to remove all plugins in all selected channels. So I think if we have a number of plugins, let me just jump. Okay, so I'll just add some audio tracks with some plugins on them here. Okay, so I'll just come over here, some track presets, and drag some over. Okay. All right, so you can see that we go to our inserts. We have a number of inserts. So I'm going to select these particular tracks. So I'll move one up here. So we'll say, okay, I want these tracks, and I'm just going to activate Q-Link. And let's say if I just control click, let's see if this is carried over if we reset. So control or command plus click just to the right on inserts. Let's see if that removes all of the inserts on both of those selected tracks. So we come here. That's going to be doing it to one particular track. But if you want to, all right, so let's undo that. And so we'll get to our inserts view here. so it looks like you could do one track at a time. It's probably just the safety mechanism, just by control clicking. But let's see if there's a project logical editor method. I'm not sure if there is. Okay, so let's say we want to have let me just, so we'll say media type is equal to, container type is equal to track. We'll say media type, and we'll say that the property is a track is selected. And then we'll say our effects. So that doesn't work there, but let's see if we can. So if we could disable them, do an inserts bypass like that if you wanted to do it across all tracks, but to remove them, I think it's going to be a single track operation at a time. Great. All right, so Mark R asks, how's the best way to change the track color in Cubase 13? It used to be accessible in the inspector in Cubase 12, but I no longer see it there. So to change the color, so say I want to go to this selected track, hold down the Alt or Option key and use your mouse scroll wheel. And then you could just navigate between your different colors like that. So it used to be a little pop-out window, and if you wanted to see kind of the pop-out colors, you could see the color wheel, the color selections there, or just Alt or Option and use the mouse scroll wheel to change the track colors. Okay. All right, just reading through comments. So just see comment. I remember the time when DirectX effects for audio tracks. Yeah, that kind of disappeared quickly. All right, so we see from Vinny, just says, hi, I'm on PC Windows 10, Cubase 12 doesn't give me hourglass. At any time I apply something, it does this on 13 on all my projects. Very frustrating, don't want to use 12 anymore. So if you have the capability of maybe doing just a quick like screen video, even if you use like a free tool like OBS just to kind of capture screen, and if you want to share a video with me of what's going on, Vinny, I'd be happy to take a look at it. Okay, we see a question from From Dallas LaRue says I have Spectral Layers 10, but for some reason when I add the extension to a track, it now always comes up as Spectral Layers 1. So make sure if so the Spectral Layers 1 license comes with Cubase, and go to your, make sure that you have if you have Spectral Layers Pro 10 or Elements, Spectral Layers 10 Elements, make sure that you go to the Activation Manager. Let's take a look at it here and go to the Activation Manager. And as we go to your Activation Manager, make sure that it's activated. So we'll just come over here. So let's say I want to go to all my products here and, go to Spectral Layers Pro 10 and make sure that it's activated here, because, Spectral Layers, when you install it, will have Spectral Layers 1, Elements, and Pro kind of all together, and depending on the license is which version shows up. So maybe if you installed Spectral Layers 1, maybe that deactivated it, but make sure that it's activated here. And you could look in the not activated license and see, if it's listed in there. But make sure that it's activated, otherwise it'll default. If it doesn't see an activation, it will default to Cubase, to Spectral Layers 1, because that is what comes with Cubase. It's part of the Cubase license. All right, so we see Patrick Emanuel A. Do composers really upgrade to new version of Cubase every time? Because in recent times I saw some composers still using old versions. Is there a reason behind it? I really like to know. So I know, I saw communications like from Hans Zimmer's camp. I know, the day after Cubase 13 was out, they ordered 15 copies for their studio. So I know lots of composers have updated, because they want those particular functionalities. They want the multi-part MIDI editing. They want the range editing. And they need those particular tools to work faster and to get their work done. So a lot of them will jump immediately, even in the middle of projects. So, and you realize that sometimes when you see, you see composers are using videos, sometimes the old versions of those videos could be, years old as well. Okay. All right, so I'm just seeing from Nicholas Carlson. So I'm not sure if I see. It seems like maybe I'm missing the first part of your question. So I see, or should I just take the safe road and buy a used MacBook M1 with lesser specs? So let me. I don't see maybe the first question, first part of the question, but if it's about an M2 or M3, Cubase will support that as it's Apple Silicon native, or the M1. So if you're kind of going, I'm just kind of speculating here. But if you are going, choosing between an M2 and M3, I would get the later processors because it's going to give you more longevity. But I'm afraid I'm missing the first part of the question. If you want to ask it again, that'd be helpful for me. Okay, so we see how make external editor. So if you want to use an external editor with Cubase, it's kind of set up for Wavelab, and all you'd have to do is when you go to audio, just choose to edit in Wavelab, and that will launch that particular file in Wavelab. So if I just want to, let's do it from something that's not kind of in a musical mode state. So So if I want to take this particular file in Wavelab to an external editor, it's not really configured for other external editors. Some of them will work via ARA2, but if I want to take this particular file, I could select the event, go to Audio, Open, Edit in Wavelab. I'll just take it out of musical mode. Sorry about that. Take it Audio, Edit in Wavelab. And now that could launch Wavelab Pro to do your other audio editing for the events. And sometimes there's not a lot of other just kind of dedicated external editors that, you know, haven't changed companies 12 times. But let me know if that's what you want to do. All right, so we have Tiago checking in from Brazil. Glad you can make it. All right, so we see, hi, I have a large amount of Atmos mixing to do over the next few months with many tedious renders needed. Is there any way to get the Atmos render to use the cycle markers instead of locators? So I know when we're doing just the actual, I think that when we're, let me just open up a project here quickly. All right, so say we have this is kind of like set for a quick Atmos. So let's say if I come here and let's set my left and right locators, and we'll go to our ADM authoring. All right, so let's say I want to export the ADM file. So I don't really have a way of importing it into Cubase, but let's say if we had cycle markers, so let me just add cycle markers here. You know, within our typical export audio mix now, it's going to be based upon, you know, we could have it based on cycle markers, but I think when we're exporting ADM, it may be set up based on left and right locators. But let's go ahead and add a marker track. And let me just quickly add some cycle markers. Okay, so song 1. So just hold down Command or Control plus Shift, and we can name them. Now, great new feature in version 13. So now what you could do is from the cycle markers, just select the cycle marker and hit the letter P, and that could automatically set the left and right locators to include the cycle markers. So of the selected event. So if I just click on the cycle marker, hit P, it'll export that range. I could hit select that cycle marker, hit the letter P, and that will set the left and right locators around the particular events. So let me know if that will work for you, Kevin. All right, so we see Matt Elder says, hi, Greg from Cambridge, Ontario, Canada. I was trying to go up an octave in the MIDI editor, Cubase 13 Pro. How do I do it? It used to be press shift. You need to press shift with the arrows up and down. So let me just come here. I'll just exit out of this. I'll just revert this quickly so we can look at one particular part. Okay, so we're in our key editor. So, it wasn't, so basically if I want to select these notes and move them up an octave, I would hold shift plus the up arrow key and the down arrow key. So without holding down shift, it will move it up one semitone at a time. But with the shift key and the up arrows, that will knock it up and down by octaves like that. So let me know if you're doing shift plus the arrow keys. All right, so we see why can't I move tracks in the mix window? So I'm not sure, why the reason is, but I think a lot of people, with the kind of new setup can, just will, since we're able now to come over here and just say, okay, I want all of my mix parameters laid out for me here, that a lot of people would just move tracks within one single window, but I don't know why. If there's any particular philosophy of why we can't just move tracks, but it's not set up for that. I know it's a long-standing feature request. And our question, why QLink is not working with panning. All right, so let me select a couple of audio tracks here. All right, so we have these tracks selected. I'm going to adjust my panning. So it looks like the panning is working as expected. So you could just come right there and pan across all the tracks. So if we have QLink deactivated, it moves one. If they're activated, the panning will move, and we can put that into absolute mode. So if we move one, all the values will now be the same versus kind of independent. You see John Barry just says, thanks, Greg. I love the way the pop-up EQ works, but a bit of the downer on it of the AB setting. So I'll pass that along. All right, so we see from Larry B, embarrassed to ask. So the only embarrassment is, not asking a simple question. So his question is, where's the preference to have the display follow along as the project plays? After the upgrade, my display doesn't follow the playing project. So it's probably just going to be just the F key. So let's say we're playing along here. And say kind of zoomed in. So say we're playing along here, and you could just come right over here and you'll see this icon. So as we play, if that is turned off, and I'll just turn it's just kind of playing out of sight. But now if I turn this on, we could see that it's just going to, when we get to the edge of this particular event, it will redraw the window. But if this is turned off, when we get to the edge, it won't redraw the window. And there's also a different mode here for, you could suspend to auto scroll when editing. So, but probably just hit the letter F and it'll probably come back for you. And we're glad that you asked simple questions. There's no sense being hung up on something simple that could be one mouse click away from happiness. All right, so we see from Pablo, can I request a trial for Nashville expansion for Groove Agent? I can't find much information in audio. So I think that there are a number of different sound sets. I'll look to see if there's a trial version, but I'll take a look. I'm not sure if there is one. A lot of the sound content isn't necessarily something they do trial versions for. But if you have I could maybe do some MIDI files with it and create something and send it to you. If you want to email me just as a brain cramp email reminder, I'd be happy to do so you could hear some of the different kits in action. All right, so Ali says he's just here to send love to Greg and everyone. Hope everyone's having a fantastic day. So thanks for stopping by and sending your good vibes. Glad you could join us this afternoon or evening or morning. All right, so we see a question from Brutal Records. If I record MIDI, always have to move a little bit left. So one of the things to make sure, I'm not sure if you're on Mac or Windows, but there's a couple of different settings. One is if you go to your studio setup, to the audio system, make sure that you have, you could make sure you have adjust for record latency. Make sure that's turned on, and you could also record shift. So those are a couple things. Now, if you're on kind of the Windows platform, you can come over, and if we go to let's see. Let's go to the MIDI port setup. Sorry, I'll just come here. And on the Windows platform, you may see some stuff where some additional options here, like use system timestamp, ignore port filters. So depending on your MIDI device, those settings may also have an impact. It's not on the Mac version, unfortunately, but you could try that on if you're running Windows. Okay. Okay, so we see Tiago's question. Is there a way to make sidechain compression inversely proportional to signal? I have a SATB plus a vocal solo, and I want more compression. Inquire when the solo is softer. So generally, sidechain is going to be, let's see if there's, just see, let me just open up a different project. So I don't know a way off the top of my head to, because usually it's going to be, Okay, so it says you want more compression, inquire when the solo is softer. All right, so let's say I want to all right, so let's take this. Yeah, so I think most of the sidechain is going to be driven by the amplitude of the signal coming in. So I was just thinking if we inverted the automation, if that would do the trick, but I think it's not going to have the impact that you want. So I think it's going, I don't know way off the top of my head to kind of invert the sidechain compression because that's how the compressor is seeing it. I'll play around with it some, Tiago, and see if I can come up with something, some clever routing or something, but nothing is really kind of jumping out at me to kind of have the inverted compression. And it could be some plugins may offer that as well. All right, so we have VXLA just saying thank you so much, Greg. Very helpful. Thankful for all your help from Chicago. So we're just glad you could be here today. All right, so we see Patrick Manuel A says, I came to know that Cubase was awarded the best DAW of the year. What are the things that involved in it, and what basis they grade things, and what are aspects involved to win best DAWs? I'm not sure, different, there's a number of awards that, Cubase wins many awards. And I think that different contests may have different criteria. So I'm not sure which particular contest or which award you're talking about. So, but so it's hard for me to answer that. All right, so we see Fred Robinson says, feel sad leaving Cubase behind, but after using it for all these decades, but hello, Nuendo, onwards and upward. So if you're staying in the Steinberg family, we'll forgive you, but I think you'll love all the features in Nuendo as well. So. Okay, so we see Alessandro Ponti asks, hi Greg, there's always been a behavior when creating a new instrument track that makes the track visible in the mixer too, although not synced with the main window. Is it so in Cubase 13? So I think what happens a lot of times is, the premise is like if we have a number of tracks, let's say we have 8 audio tracks, and let's say we go to our mixer view and we go to, let's say, our channel visibility, and we only want to see these 4, we only want to see the first 4 tracks in this visibility. And let's say if we synchronize okay, so we see that we have this is being, all right, so we have sync channel type filter. So now when we go to add an instrument track, this gets added into the existing tracks. I know some people hate it. Some people, so if this is kind of what you're referring to, that this will automatically come as being added into kind of maybe a saved visibility configuration. So, and sometimes people want the ability to have new tracks in the different visibility configurations so that you don't have to go searching for it afterwards. So let me know if that's kind of what you're referring to. So I think they want to make sure that it is visible even after adding it in case you wanted to include it in different versions. All right, so we have from Nuendo 2496. Is there a key command I can assign to simply turn off the monitor speakers after the output bus? I don't want to use control room. Thanks. The only, I guess you could route it to no output if, so let's say if we have tracks that are playing, so let's say I'll take just this hot mess project here since everyone's on. So let's say I have my project playing here. I guess I could take the selected channel and let's create a project logical editor. I'm just going to reread this. So you can simply turn off the monitors, So I think, with this, with the control room is kind of a good solution for this because we could still play and shut the monitors off. Just kind of that easily. We could, I'm not sure if you wanted to hear it and not go through the monitors. If that's the case, you might be able to come up to, let's say, Project Logical Editor, and we'll say we want to take selected tracks. Let's transform. We want to take track is, we're going to take, and we'll say our property is set to is selected, and we want to set, let's go to track operation, and let's set output, connect output to not connected. So let's say we're playing this. So let's say we'll come over here to, let's say just our channel inspector. Let's see if it's routed it. Yeah. So, I don't know, so I'm not sure. So here we have it set to, I'll just say to no bus. So I guess it doesn't allow me to not send the master output to no bus, but let me know if there's a specific reason you don't want to use a control room, because it's kind of a really perfect use of it when you come over here and you could just have it still go out of your headphones and still have it play, but disable kind of the monitor. So let me know if there's a specific reason you don't want to use the control room, because that really could decouple, the monitoring path from the mixer. So. All right, so we see Patrick Emmanuel A asks, what was the best Cubase update which shaken up the music industry apart from 13? So I think 5 was a big one, 10 was a big one as well. 6 added a lot of, like, the drums, like a huge one. And, this is going back to 96, 90, maybe 97, 98. Is when he came out with VST for Windows, because it was originally just for, at the time, to power PC processors on Macs. And when that came out, that was like a huge, I remember doing just, seminar tours every day for, it was like 4 months. We would do, in the United States, we would do like, there's 3 or 4 of us, and we would do like 4 or 5 guitar centers, a week, and go home for the weekend, go out, do 4 or 5 more, and then we were done with guitar centers. At that time they had like 120 stores. We would hit all the Sam Ashes, and then we'd hit all the independent dealers, and then go back and hit Guitar Center again. So like when VST originally came out, of having the real-time effects without having to have like super expensive proprietary hardware, that was a huge one. But I think the reaction to Cubase 13's been overwhelmingly positive. I got to show it last night kind of in detail for the film composition department at Berkeley, and they were all kind of super excited about all the new functions. Okay, so we see Larry B says auto scroll working now. Thanks, Fred. So that's great. Glad it was a simple fix. Thanks, Fred, for helping him out. All right, Heartbreak Time Machine says, I really appreciate these streams. Man, I learned a lot. So that's great. That's why we do them, so everyone can be a powered Cubase user. And I'll train everyone to do my job. All right. All right, you see the Heartbreak Time Machine has smashed the like button. That's good. All right, I just had a jump in my chat field. Trying my best to catch up. All right, so I may have lost some questions. I apologize. So I think I may have lost about 15 minutes of questions. So if you think I missed your question, go back and ask again. Sorry for that. All right, so we see from Richard Michael, hi Greg, if I upgrade to 13, will the new vocal chain in 13 be available for me in my 12 version? So I don't think so. I think it's only going to work in version 13, even if you have the license for it. So, all right, so we see from Ness, hi Greg, in chord pads, what does the list of colors in the chord order mean? So when we go to the chord pads, you could actually, as we look at your different chord pads, you could have this colorized, and the colors just mean that they're kind of more harmonically aligned to each other. So let me see to remember where to turn the colors on, but that's kind of what the colors indicate, that the chords are, when we see these chords, that they are more related harmonically. So let's say if I want to go to a C sharp sus2 7th with a B in the bass, when we look at kind of the colors, we can see that these, those particular chords are more harmonically related than the other chords. So it just kind of shows you kind of, like harmonic proximity between those particular chords. All right, wonderful to see Gerald Ely on. All right, so we see Perry Michael Allen says, hey, from Amsterdam, is it still possible to purchase Cubase 12? So when you purchase Cubase 13, it will work for, you can run and install Cubase 12 for it. So your Cubase 13 license will work for Cubase 12 as well as Cubase 13. So if you just activate your Cubase 13 license and install Cubase 12 will run. There may be dealers that still have inventory of Cubase 12, but to make it easier for the physical sales channel where we have boxes that have codes, so that we don't have to, dealer doesn't have to send all the boxes back to us to get new, fresh inventory. That once the license is activated, it will automatically turn into the latest version. So with that, but again, your Cubase 13 license will still run Cubase 12. It's the same price as it was before. So you could run Cubase 12 and Cubase 13. Okay, wonderful to see Jeff Gibbons on. All right, so we have Remy asks, hi Greg, how can you shift audio or MIDI parts with tempo and measure signature change tracks all together at once? Let's say N bars, the case is sync audio to video. All right, so let me just jump back. All right, so let's say I have just find this one particular MIDI event here. Okay, so let's say I have okay, so let's say I'm here and can you shift audio or MIDI parts with tempo and measure signature? All right, so let's say and let me just get my tempo track down here. Okay, and let's see if I have a signature track. So let's say I have tempo here. Here, I'm sorry, I'll move my tempo down. Okay, so if we grab kind of like the range tool, if we want to move all of those events together, we could do that. Or if we want it to, and one of the things you could do with the range tool, if you want it to be global for, let's say we have audio and MIDI, if I want to take all of the events, hold down, with the range tool active, hold down Control or Command plus the Shift key, and now you could just move kind of like the entire range. So you could do that with the tempo information intact. So when you do kind of like a global range, at that point we could just move the different components together. So say, okay, again, Control Command Shift, and it's like, okay, I need this data to be copied to there. Then I can move the audio, MIDI, signature, tempo information around. So instead of worrying about selecting all the objects, you could globally select the range with Control Command plus Shift. So let me know if that helps, Remy. All right. All right, so we see Benny's on today from Sweden. He just got a brand new i9 computer. Congratulations. It's always a great feeling. Now you have to probably spend a lot of time getting everything installed. All right, so we see how you configure Cubase 13 for using I/O Station 24C. So I assume that's just an audio interface. So if we want to come over here, go to your studio menu to studio setup. You want to go to your audio system, and then you could choose your audio interface there. Once that is configured, we can go into Cubase, go to your studio menu to studio connections, and you could set all of your available inputs and outputs here. So, and you may see presets. So if it has 24 ins, you may see 12 stereo, 24 mono ins. You could set these as presets, and that could add all of your inputs and your outputs of where you want to be physically routed from that device. So, but let me know if it's not an audio interface. All right, so we see from Bob Lynn asks, hello again, my VST plugin manager add VST plugin path is titled VST2 plugin path. The block list is blocking VST3 items, Moto base VST3, SSL VST3 as well, SSL VST3, complete control VST3. Where am I messing up? So make sure, one, they could be 32-bit or 64-bit VST3 plugins. So see if they're the 32-bit they're installed, or if they're the 64-bit. If they are the 64-bit, it could be that those plugins are causing issues on your system. And you may have to go to the VST plugin manager, go to your block list, and maybe select a particular plugin, and you could say try to click on the reactivate. But sometimes when plugins go into the block list, it's because it's going to cause system instability. So, but you could try to manually reactivate it. But make sure that it's not just like a lot of times you install multiple plugin formats and versions, that you don't have the 32-bit version installed instead of the 64-bit. All right, wonderful to see Michael Pierce. Still having some computer issues. Hope you were able to get that kind of figured out. We see Pablo is quadrifuzzing right now. All right, so we see just a response from Jeff Gibbons, I guess, to Harmon Bassa about maybe setting things for musical mode. So one quick way of doing this, as Jeff had mentioned, was to go into the pool window to select all of your audio, and you could activate musical mode. You'll see musical mode right here that you could just simply check and uncheck musical mode, or if you wanted to switch all of the algorithms for how it's doing time stretching, you could do that from the pool. All right. Appreciate the help, Jeff. Hope you're doing well. All right. See, John Costigan from Kenosha says, as your attorney, he's giving legal advice. He recommends full usage of the like button. Fred Robinson saying the notepads are a useful feature that he uses a lot. All right, Michelle just has a comment. I think Cubase is the reason why my music is unique and stands out. I like Cubase because it doesn't necessarily kind of predispose my workflow. But it's a great comment, Michelle. Thanks. All right, we see Daniela Tocan is on. Glad you can make it. All right, and Soren is on from Sweden. So let us know if you have released your recording. I think it's about 2.5 weeks old, Soren, if you got it released. I think you were aiming for November 3rd. Then we could all listen to it. All right, so we have Louis Che checking in from Chicago. Glad you can make it today. All right, Soren asked, Greg, about clipping. Is it a matter of going over 0 and a fader for getting clipping? So not necessarily. I mean, if you go, so there's going to be a lot of, so when you're dealing with 32-bit floating point audio, it could be, that, it could, I think via physics, if we think of the particular dynamic range, it's like 1392 or 1592 dB. So, I mean, you can definitely clip some stuff, but depending on your gain structure, but, if you're over 0, as long as you export it to a 32-bit floating point file as the final destination, you'll be in good shape. So you could always go back and not have it clip. All right, so we see from Andy Shaw, it says 13 Pro, Windows 11 Novice. How do I change articulation on a single track, please? Writing for a string quartet. All right, so depending on your instrument, you may have to load up like an expression map. So if you have, so you have 13 Pro, so you have access to Iconica Sketch. And if you're doing that, let me just find, if I have this still open. Should still have it. Let me just. All right, so let me open it up here real quick. All right, so let's say, so it could really depend upon the library that you're using and if you have expression maps for it. So let's say I'm just using a cello from Iconica, and since it's a Hallian instrument, I could go into the editor and we have what we call different expression maps. So we double click, we come over here. If it's Iconica based, we could say import key switches. That will automatically take the key switches. So, and now when we select articulations, all of my key switches are here. So you can say, okay, I want to put in pizzicato here. So in this way, you could just go through all of your available articulations. Now, if you don't have the expression maps, you could come over here. Often they're available kind of online. You could just go to your expression map setup, and choose to make a new expression map. But once you do that, then everything will be so easy to kind of switch between different articulations for your string quartet. All right, so we see from Pylon Records, great to see you. Hi, Greg. Great to see you. Live stream going strong. Do you know if there's any plans to introduce control voltage in Cubase, basic control of CV instruments without using MIDI to CV conversion? So I haven't heard of anything, but I haven't asked. I was supposed to go over for some meetings in September, but my wife had to go through surgery, so I didn't get a chance to go and kind of have meetings with a bunch of the people there. So I'm hoping to do some of it maybe later this year or early next year. But I haven't heard of anything, but I'll check in and see if there's, if there's any thoughts on working with that. But nothing has been announced. All right, so Bizkit Ben says, could you run through any new settings on the sampler track in 13, please? Currently using 12. Okay, so let's take a look. There's some great new stuff in the sampler track. One of it's going to be an addition of new stretching algorithms. So, people had really appreciated the spectral algorithms that came in Halion 7, and those have now been kind of migrated over. So we'll come over here, let's pop over, adjust my screen, except for the projector at Berkeley last night. All right. Okay, so let's open up some of the sampler track. All right, so one of the things that you'll see is, like if we have a voice, much better when we go to the audio warp, that we have different algorithms for pitch shifting. So we would say, okay, let's come over to like our spectral voice. And if you wanted to adjust like formants, if you needed to, for special effects or to make it sound. And there's also like, and before we had legato mode, but now we could come over here and just say, so if I just kind of hold the notes down with this new algorithm, it's like really great for doing. With me all night, I wanna know you inside, touch on me now. Stay with me all night, I wanna know you inside, touch on me now. So as we would just play different notes, we could just kind of create harmonies. Now, if we wanted to take something kind of as innocuous as, let's come over here and we could go into different, just put this into, so let me just reset everything. I'll just add a new sampler track here. All right, so let's say this is kind of maybe not the most interesting sample, but we could do a lot of stuff with envelopes in 13. So let's say we want to go to our volume envelope. So, we could do basic stuff like, okay, I want this to, gradually fade in over time, and there's an undo. So as we get more creative, we could also choose to, adjust your sensitivity for velocity. So if I have 0%, if I hit it very soft or very hard, it will sound the same. If I put this to 100, if I hit it soft. or loud. We could have that velocity sensitivity. And if we now want to come over and start drawing in different envelopes, we could have these synchronized to the grid if we wanted to. So if we say, okay, I just want to draw in an envelope here, and if we want to take, let's say, okay, I want to take that selection of that particular grid, and let's right click, and we can say, let's invert the levels. And now I want to come here and maybe compress the contents. I want to scale the contents. I want to tilt these contents. Now we could also go into, like, you know, as I draw in, we could have different envelope shapes. So we can say, okay, I want to take this, and now we could choose different envelope shapes for that box. Or if we grab the paint brush, we could now come over and say, okay, I want to paint in this envelope, and we could have that kind of scale over time. And let's just kind of zoom a little bit here, you know, so we can say, okay, as we're kind of just working, I want to do a different shape here. So I'll say, let's just do, you know, from this point, I want to draw in. And say, oh, I didn't like that. Let me just draw in an envelope at the end of the release. And let's say, okay, I want to go to my pitch envelope. So I'll come here, and we could adjust kind of our pitch amount. And let's do filter envelopes. Let's say we want maybe like kind of a classic filter. So we'll go to our filter envelopes. And then if I want to make, you know, changes just on like one particular section, but without affecting the others, we could put it into fixed mode. And I can say, okay, I just want to change those envelopes to this, and now draw in more of a V shape for that. And then if we wanted this to be audio warped as well, so you could kind of spend hours kind of tweaking the different envelopes. And, you know, if we're to start exactly where we began with our unlimited levels of undo, we started there, and then just in a matter of a couple seconds making something that was kind of boring much more. So the new envelopes, the new spectral algorithm for pitch shifting, or some of the new additions in Cubase 13 sampler track. All right. All right, so I just see Catalina, does it work? So I think if you look at the system requirements for Cubase 13, it's going to be Big Sur or higher. I don't know if people are running it on Catalina often when we do the system requirements. I think that's what they are, is Big Sur and higher. It just means that we haven't gone through testing for particular operating systems that might be kind of out of older operating systems, right? That we had to test for 7 versions of each Mac OS, as there's different updates that come out, so they may not just do testing for that. So I haven't tried it in Catalina, but maybe someone else has. They could share their experience. All right, Sam K asks, how can I reduce the velocity of an entire MIDI region? I can't select all the notes at once. So if we have, let's say I see my velocity of, so we'll come here, right? So let's say I want to take just these particular notes. If I select those notes, there's a couple ways of doing it. One, let's say if we're in our full screen editor, or we could do it here as well, I think. So let's just come here and go to the info line. So I'm going to select kind of a group of notes here, and we'll see the velocity settings. So as I adjust the velocity, I'll zoom in to make it a little easier. So let's say I want to take these notes, and we adjust the velocity here, so we could just adjust the velocity, and you can see kind of the green notes. Let me colorize these. So like as we just come here, and if you see the green lines, as we adjust our velocity, we could increase or decrease all of just a selected range. So if I want only these 2 notes but not these notes, whatever is selected, we could just adjust. Or you could also just select these particular notes, hold down Control Shift, and you could adjust the velocity by moving your mouse cursor up and down of the selected notes like that. So most people would do just the the info line. All right, so we see from Louis Che from Chicago, says, Greg, I have a song that the tempo varies. I'm looking to do the drums with a new drummer. How can I correct the tempo and provide a stem with all the instruments but drums and a click track for new recording? Okay, so let's say I want it to come here. Okay, so I will solo this track. So let's say I want to take this track, and this track is varying in tempo. I'm just going to remove, or I'll just do it with a brand new track. It'll be a little clearer. Okay, so we'll import an audio file. All right, so let's say I put on my click track here. And there's no correlation between the two. So I'm going to just select this particular event. So if you want to take the whole recording and then re-record a drum track with a steady tempo, we go to your project menu. Let's go to tempo detection. Let's say analyze. Okay, so as we look at this now, we could just say, okay, as we listen to it, All right, so if I want this to play back kind of a steady tempo, I'm going to just set my meter here to 4/4. Okay, so if we want this to play back, what I do is I select the particular event. We can now, and we can do this for one event, like if you're doing it to a multi-track, select all of the particular tracks. You want to go to your audio menu to advanced, and from there we're going to say create set definition from tempo. And what this does is it basically takes the entire audio file here with all the tempo changes and embeds that into the particular file, so we can see all these changes. So if I want this to play back a perfectly steady tempo, what I'm going to do is to turn the tempo track off and say now I want it to be there's 120. Or I want it to be 130 beats a minute. So, or say 132. So now it's playing back perfectly steady. So now it's taking each beat, and this could do it across a multi-track, taking each beat of every file and stretching it so it's playing back perfectly steady tempo. All right. Okay, great to see Randy Leon from Texas, and we have MW saying howdy to everyone. Okay, reading through comments. All right, so we see from 7-2, hi Greg, can you browsing and replace sounds through Media Bay in the preview, the sampler track, or Groove Agent? If you don't, then you, okay, so it says, can you browsing and replacing sounds through Media Bay in the preview and sampler track or in Groove Agent? You don't have to drag and drop to replace samples, okay. All right, so let me just set that up real quick. Let's say if I do a new project, we'll just do a kick sample here. We just okay, so let's just come here. I'm just going to create just a quick pattern. Okay, so let's just... All right, so let's say if we have... All right, it says... browsing and replacing sounds from media bay in a preview on sampler track or groove agent. You don't have to drag and drop to replace the samples. So let me just see. We come here and replace, but let me just see if there's there's probably a way of doing it, but you know, that seems to work pretty well. But maybe if you could share a little tip. All right. All right, so we see Acoustic Chris says, "Hi, can't connect my Kai 261 MIDI keyboard to Cubase 12 Pro. Please help." So let me know if it's being seen as a MIDI device in the operating system, because Cubase will use whatever MIDI device the operating system is seeing. So as soon as you connect it, and you should be able to, you know, come here, and if you hit the MIDI keys, you should see kind of MIDI activity on the lower right-hand corner. As you hit the keys there, if you go to, you know, your studio setup to your MIDI port setup, and you don't see the Akai listed here, then it's probably, you know, an issue with it not being recognized by the computer. But generally, Cubase will have access to every MIDI device that's available at the operating system level. All right, so we see Gareth asking who wants a Hot Mess Christmas song. So that sounds like fun. All right, so we're doing okay on time. All right, so we see Barney asks, does anyone know that it's possible to sync Cubase 13 from an external source? So yeah, you can sync Cubase to external timecode, to external MIDI timecode or SMPTE timecode, convert it to MIDI timecode. You would go to the transport to the project synchronization setup, and you would just tell Cubase to activate external sync, and you want it to listen to incoming MIDI timecode. If it's going to be an external device like a drum machine, something that's outputting MIDI clock, the MIDI clock is not going to have enough resolution to properly synchronize anything that has to deal with digital audio. But you know, if you have an external sync setup like SMPTE timecode on tape, which was kind of the method of doing that, and you may need to take the synchronizer setup. And the tricky thing is, you know, you can do that easily with MIDI, but when doing with digital audio, you would need to take the time code, the clock, from your synchronizer. So you would need to synchronize audio correctly, you would need to take the time code to go into your sync box, take the like a MIDI or USB connection from the sync box to the to a MIDI interface, and also take the word clock out from that sync box to the word clock, to a clock input. It could be a BNC, ADAT, AS, SPDIF, but you need a digital connection for the clock to be synchronized as well. Otherwise, it's not going to properly sync. So see Barney just saying Cubase 12 was not able to sync to external devices. So yeah, it definitely has since the very first Cubase version. So. All All right, so we see David Burr says MIDI input transformer different in Cubase 13 than 12. I created a script in 12 that needs to be modified to work in 13. In 13 I get 1 and add 64, but the result is 64, not 65 as expected. So I think it's going to be the same. It could also, so let's say if I have, we'll just come here, I'll go to just an instrument track. Let's add an instrument. I will take MIDI CC1 here. So I'm going to come to my input transformer. So go to the routings, to my input transformer. Let's add it on the track. Open up the control panel. So at this point, I want to transform type is equal to our MIDI CC. So we'll say our MIDI controller, and we'll say MIDI controller value equals 1. So let's say I want to add 10 to that. So we'll say so this should take my MIDI CC1 and convert that into MIDI CC11. So let me just I'll just do subtype here to add 10. Okay. So now we'll go to our MIDI inserts. Let's go to our MIDI monitor. So I turn this off, and my MIDI monitor shows modulation with this turned on. Should be showing expression. Let me just make sure it's on the correct value here real quick. Sorry. So it looks like that should, I would think that that would be okay, so it looks like that, I would think that that would work for that particular track, but let me just put it into record. That preset turned on. Oh, let me just I'm still in external sync. Okay, so I'll just put this in record, and let me just look to see what data was recorded. Yeah, it doesn't look like that's working for me as I would expect, but if you want to send me your preset, I'd be happy to take a look at it, and you could send it to me at Club Cubase at steinberg.de. All right, so we see from Samuel asks, is there something new around the Dolby Atmos feature in Cubase 13? So that was just, introduced in Cubase 12.1. So it's going to have, the same Dolby Atmos functionality. All right, so we see from Acoustic Chris, would Cubase 13 connect properly to a Kai 261 USB on Windows? Because it doesn't with Cubase 12. So any controller that's being seen by your operating system should be available to use. So let us know if you see it in your operating system. All right, so we see maybe Daniela Tocan. I guess this is with Cubase 13. Is it verified to work with Catalina? So I don't think there's going to be any official testing on Catalina because it's the operating system is too old to go through and spend time doing quality assurance testing on. All right, so you see the Pentagon audio manufacturer says only problem with control room is for Q-Sense for monitor mixes. So I continue to ask for like 8 Q-Sens, but it hasn't been a widely requested feature from users. So make sure that when there are different surveys that go out that you express that you want that. But you could also use 5 if you have the control room itself that you could route out as headphone distribution. So. All right, my chat field just jumped. Let me see if I can catch up here. All right, so I think I'm in the ballpark. Okay, I'm just finding my spot. Sorry about that. All right, according to Michael Teams, I am Yoda. So I think I'm a little taller than him. I think he's better with a lightsaber too. So I see Gareth just asking about a Christmas single. So I'm up for any hot mess project. So send it along. All right, so we see from Kevin Mehmed, it says, in the channel strip, how to hide and use the fader in Cubase Pro 13 with I upgraded from Cubase 12. So if you're in the channel strip, so I'm not sure if this is a channel strip, all you'd have to do is right click and go to setup sections, and let's see if the fader could be hidden. It may just be fixed with the fader. All right, so but we could probably make it much smaller, but it looks like it's fader may be fixed on there. But I think most people want the fader. And let's see if we come over here, if we go to the subsections, if the fader here, we could take the fader off from the channel strip here. So let me know if that's the channel strip you're referring to, Kevin. And if it's in, let's see if it's in this channel strip view. So, or I'm not sure if it's, if you're in the strip here, now you could just kind of click there and see the fader. But maybe if you could just clarify that, Kevin, for me, for my benefit. All right, so we see John Barry just says a feature request for the state buttons that are on the mixer to also be available in the project window, and vice versa. The state buttons in the project window are different. Okay, I'll pass that along, and I passed along the other requests for the visibility of the state of the plugins, but let me just check to make sure. Yeah, I don't think it's going to be in the default mode, but I'll pass that along, John. So good suggestion. All right, so we see Daniela Tocan says, I will not upgrade because I will have one installation less with an upgrade. So you have, three different activations that can be active. So if you have Cubase 12 or Cubase 13, you'd have three different activations. We see from Patrick Mandeville A says, thank you, Greg. Today's live was great. Got to learn a lot. Cubase 13 weekly live is the best thing that makes people think that we can learn the DAW fully. And there's a guy that can help. So it's wonderful. Thanks for being on the live stream. It's always great to see you on. All right, so we see Custer Chris just saying, I'm new to DAW, so I'm not sure. My friend is a professional and spent hours to make it work and got very basic functionality. So I'm not sure, Chris, if you're using it as a MIDI controller or if you're using it as a MIDI remote device down here and you're configuring that, so those could be two different things. So, but, and I see Jazz Dude has posted MIDI remote scripts. All right, you see Jeff Gibbons has to run. I'm so glad you were able to join us. Thanks for stopping by. See, Gareth just says Greg equals the best TV program on the interweb. So, yeah, I remember I did a dealer training in Seattle once, and it was like probably a dozen sales guys from different music stores in Seattle, and someone had invited Alan White from Yes to be there, who also played with John Lennon on, he's a drummer on Imagine, just amazing drummer. And he came to the seminar. He sat through like a whole like dealer training, and he was like, "That was the best concert I've seen in years." So, but thank you for the kind words, Gareth. See, David Gibson just says, hoping that my wife is well. So she's doing okay. She's had like some little flare-ups, but it's almost to be expected with nerves. But we're just making sure she's taking it easy. But thank you for the sentiments. All right, so you see Gareth just saying the envelope shapes in the sampler track is a revelation of the day. And painting them is the second revelation. I feel good if I got a revelation for Gareth. I feel my job is complete. And he says he could spend the entire Cenozoic era tweaking envelopes. Yeah, it's kind of a rabbit hole. All right, so we see just a question from Yasmin, baby. How to move project cursor along with the mouse position. So I think if you just, if you just click and hold down Control or Command plus Shift and click anywhere, then the positions will just be, as you click, that will just move both the, so let me know if that is helpful for what you want to do. I'm trying to catch up here. All right, so we see Sven Isaacson is glad you clarified. Says Cubase Pro 13 runs fine under Catalina on his ancient Mac Pro. So thanks for sharing that, Sven. All right, so we just see some comments on MediaBay. Says, would love a way to smart organize samples in the MediaBay. Hello, so, you can add lots of different metadata in MediaBay. So, if you come over here, so these are all the criteria. So most people don't actually, figure out the metadata. And as you work with metadata and add metadata in, this allows you to find things very quickly. Now, if you have stuff that's kind of maybe doesn't fit into the given categories, you can come over here to the settings menu, and there's lots of other additional categories that you could use. But let's say you just want, to make your own metadata that's searchable. You can come over here and just say, okay, I want this to be text. I want it to be a yes, no. I want it to be a number. So you could actually create your own metadata. So, if you go through drum loops, like let's say you get, 100 drum loops or sample loops from somewhere, you could just audition it and say, I'll never use this, sucks. Like I used to make metadata tags that said sucks or cool or maybe, or for this client. And then, as you kind of work with different people, say, oh, this is a good loop that Joe would like for a project, or this one is for Martha's project. And you could now just search for your own metadata. So, a lot of people underutilize the tagging. And once you get into the tagging, that's how you could effectively manage large libraries of sounds and samples. So, as you get a new instrument, just go through the different sounds, create your own tags, make do ratings. This is a 1-star sound to me. This is a 3-star. Everything defaults to 3 stars, but maybe you can say, I'm only looking for 5-star sounds that are piano. So, utilize the existing technology that's there, and you could have kind of very smart organization. Okay, so we see from Glenn Darby says, hi all, Elements user upgraded to Elements 13. And what's new blurb stated, various audio sources can be routed to audio tracks. The only thing missing on mine, Elements 12, it doesn't work. So I think that may have been an error in the, someone else had asked about this. So when I tested it, I saw that, I couldn't get the instrument to be the audio input directly. And I could do it in Artist and Pro, so it may have been just an error on the website for that. So I apologize for that. I know it's frustrating. All right, so you see Fred Robinson has to take off, so thanks for joining us. And enjoy your Nuendo. All right, Fred wants everyone to hit like. All right, and we see Nuendo 13 tomorrow, so there will be a Nuendo 13 live stream tomorrow. You can check it out. My colleague Aldo Lamano will be doing it. He always does a great job. through comments. All right, so it looks like all the members of Hot Mess are up for a Christmas song. So, all right, so we see Justin Hampton says, "Can I request Splice integration since Cubase is available on Splice?" I think having them be able to sell the program versus integration with particular with all of their sample management is like really different levels of working together. So sometimes we want to make things make sure that you're using all the capabilities that are in Media Bay to start with, and also sometimes when we rely on third-party companies, like a lot of people get upset with us when Rewire was abandoned by the company that developed it, and other companies get blamed, like, oh, why don't you have Rewire? Well, this third party. So we don't want to necessarily be reliant on third-party functionality for a lot of because maybe the other company is not keeping up to date with different operating systems, or not keeping up to date with plugin formats, so different stuff like that. So, but I'll pass it along as a feature suggestion. All right, so we see, hi, when I have several drum tracks in a folder and do phase coherent group editing and everything worked fine, why do I get an error message when switching off and again the group editing button? So sometimes when you get an error message like that, it could be that the particular tracks may be different lengths, and it's just kind of, sometimes it will give you a warning message. A lot of times you won't notice any of the perceived changes, but let's say if we're here and we've done, let's say, group editing, and you said you did phase coherent, so we'll just come here, activate that. So now as we do some warping, so let's go ahead and just enable free warp here, zoom in a little more. So let's say we put in different warps. So as we move our different events around, so I didn't get the error message, but sometimes if you're working with source material that's different lengths, it's kind of expecting to see kind of the same lengths of the audio, so maybe that's what's generating the error message for you. You see, Gareth just says Greg Gundo endorsed by Alan White. So he's great, with so many great stories from Alan. So it was very sad when he passed, but I'm really glad I got to know him. All right, so I'm going to get to some of the questions that were sent in advance. Let me see. All right. So before we run out of time, so let me get to those. And again, if you want to send questions in advance, you can send it to clubcubase@steinberg.de. All right, so question. Why is 48 frames per second not supported from the video files in Cubase? I always have to use other programs to convert to a suitable frame rate first and render them to using Cubase. So, because 48 frames per second isn't like I think it's often used for like high speed video stuff. So it probably represents like, 1/100th of 1% of the videos out there are, it's a really uncommon frame rate. So when people are generally using video in Cubase, it's going to be 99.9999% of the times it's going to be typical frame rates, 24, 25, like if you're in Europe, 30 non-drop, and then pull up and pull down. So, 48 frames per second is not a common frame rate for working with video, so you probably will have to convert it to other frame rates to using Cubase. And I think with just about any other DAW, but I don't use any others. So question, is there M4A support? I would find I could find it, but how to use Audacity to make Cubase able to work with my files from my voice recorder. So, most voice recorders will give you the option to convert that to MP3 or to WAV files, and those are way more common formats as well. So, I know some people will just record ideas and sketch them on your voice, like on your phone, but it's usually not a professional kind of format for audio delivery. Okay, so we have a question. It says, this time I have what I hope is 2 simple questions. I tracked down a problem I had with all MIDI messages were sent out at the same channel to the group and channel menu in the inspector's routing panel. It was set to channel 1. When set to any, everything works as it should. The problem is that when I create new MIDI instrument track, it's always set to channel 1. So, now with Cubase 13, when we do this, if we go to add track, MIDI or instrument, we can now, let's see, it's not, if we go to add a MIDI track, I guess not on an instrument track, but on the MIDI track, when we come here, you could actually choose which particular channel is going to be added, and you could set this to MIDI channel any. So once you just do that, add a MIDI track, and then you could set it to channel any by default. All right, so question 2, is there a setting that would make all my audio MIDI instruments tracks be created with the monitor button active? Forgetting to activate this is a very common problem. So having it activated by default is a logical option. So if you have, what we can do by default is to have, as a track is added, just like we did here, is to have it, monitored, to have it armed for record when selected. So I think that makes way more sense than having it monitored. So if you have it monitored, turned on, at that point you could hear it but not record. So a lot of people want to add a track and hit record. So there are preferences to come over, and if we go to your preferences, we go to editing to and we could say, I think in project and mix console, we could say enable record on selected audio tracks or enable record on selected MIDI tracks. And depending upon your monitor mode that you have set in VST, so you could, this will default to manual, but if you set it to tape machine style, as soon as you hit record on a selected track, that will enable the monitoring. So I think it makes more sense to have the track record enabled than monitored enabled by default, but you could try those settings. All right, and we see if you have the time, maybe I could give an opinion request regarding the new single add +1 insert panels. I think this is a great feature, but saves a lot of screen real estate. And it says the issue arises when your post fader inserts are used. I see no way to insert one of these unless there is already one there. The only way I see is to insert one if none is already inserted via the channel settings window. Secondly, if one is inserted, all the empty pre-fader slots again are displayed. This renders the whole feature moot, wouldn't you say? I've seen the argument that the post-fader slots aren't used. This is not true. I used a Waves NLS virtual summing plugin on every channel. This is designed to reside last after the fader. This is how the inserts panel looks in my inspector. All right, so when doing this, and we kind of showed this before, so just to keep real estate, if we add an insert, so I'll come over here, let's add like our VST bass amp on this track, and then if I want it to be, if I want it now to come over here and make this post fader, you just could right click and make this move to a post fader slot. Now once you have this, it will show your default position for your post fader slots. So now you could move this. So it gives you the flexibility. So it doesn't show all. So you notice that it doesn't show 16. And if we add an audio track here, so let's add an audio track, and I'll go to my full mix console here. Or let's, we'll just do it from here. So let's say on our new audio track that we added, and let's open up, let's say, all of the inserts here. But let's say, now, even on this guitar, if I have my post fader slot here, depending on where your division line is, and I will just come over here and just see if so let's say on my guitar part I have one pre-fader, multiple post fader. So I come here and let's add an insert. So I'll come here, let's add that, and now we make this post fader. So at this point, when we make it post fader, it doesn't show all the slots, but it's going to show the slot based upon, so that we have an existing pre-fader and post-fader slot. So it really depends on where the line is default to. So it's not going to necessarily show you all 16. And I don't think any, I don't see any, I wouldn't expect anyone from the company to say, oh, there's no use for post-fader inserts. So maybe, someone else had mentioned that, but I think we understand, we make pre-fader inserts and post-fader inserts for reasons. All right, next question. Hi, Greg. Does Cubase provide console analog emulation plugins? So, we have a wide variety of different plugins, but we don't have kind of a marketing hype of, oh, get an API console, get a Neve console, get an SSL sound, I could tell you that, when Steinberg and when Yamaha, it was a Steinberg sold product, we did the Neve Portico series, that Rupert Neve, and he told me this himself, he was just really kind of miffed by all the, every company's plug-in versions of what he had created, like replications of his stuff, because he thought it looked like it, but he thought sonically it wasn't good. And the only plugins that he ever approved in his lifetime were the Yamaha VCM plugins. So we don't necessarily, we want you to have, a wide variety of different sounds, because if you actually think about a console, a lot of the consoles are very limited in comparison to the flexibility you get in the default Cubase settings. You have one EQ, but your default channel settings, you could have 3 different EQs. You could have a way more capable noise gate. You could have way more inserts, way more sends than you do on any of the consoles. So we don't want to necessarily limit your functionality for kind of a marketing gimmick of something that's like, oh, it looks like an API, so it must sound like an API, or it looks like a Neve, so it must sound like a Neve. So there's no direct, we're trying to emulate this console particularly. We want to give you a lot more flexibility, because the consoles can't mimic the functionality of what we have in the Cubase mixer currently. Okay, so we see a question. Hi, Greg. I love the new channel view left in the left zone. Are there any plans for letting third-party developers adapting VSTs to support the pop-up controls you could get with the strip effects? So this question is kind of dealing with, if we go to our, we'll just come over and let's take a look at our channel strip here. So if we say, okay, I want these little functions here. We get these little like pop-up windows. So I'm not sure if Steinberg has kept this proprietary, but I'm not sure if any third-party company has, since this is 10 days old, 12 days old, if any of the third-party companies have contacted us expressing an interest to do this. And probably if, companies did, Steinberg has opened up, protocols for VST and ASIO. They may consider it, but we're not going to necessarily develop an entire, software development kit if the companies aren't interested in doing it. So maybe if the companies reach out to Steinberg, it might be opened up. All right, so we see next question. A question regarding Cubase 13. Since Cubase has made the option to change a track from stereo to mono and vice versa, they have changed the way. Have they changed the way a multi-mono plugin is processed in a group or bus channel? For example, in a drum group with compression, if a tom is hit mostly in the left, you wouldn't want to be compressing the right channel the same amount even at all. This could be applied to the master bus situation. To handle this, you would use a multi-mono plugin so that doesn't happen. Not all compressor plugins have the ability to not link between left and right channels. Is there a better way of handling this situation? Does anybody actually use a multi-mono plugin in such situations? So a lot of times what you could do, if we have a stereo source, let's say I come here and these are being routed to a group channel, and I want it to take this group and apply a plugin, and let's say this is our stereo group, and when I go to my inserts, if we wanted to apply just compression on one particular channel, so I'll say, okay, let's go to my dynamics. I want to open up the black valve compressor, so we open that. So once we are kind of in, we'll open up our channel settings, and let's go to this. We'll go to our routing editor, and we could just say, let's go to mono. And as we do this, we could say double click, and you could pick which particular side is being processed or not. So sometimes what happens with a lot of multi-mono plugins is, you're compressing one channel and not the other. It could cause a lot of phase issues in your mix as well. So it's something you have to be aware of. So, but you could process one particular channel with a compressor if you had to. So we see a question. Hey, hi Greg. Is there a way to have the MIDI editor piano roll only show the track you click on the left when you had the MIDI track showing up in the sidebar? Okay, so just like we were showing this, let's take a look at. So open up kind of a big MIDI piece. So if I have all of these in a particular folder, so we'll just move selected tracks to a new folder. So I want to edit this, and let's say I have like a number of different tracks or the folder selected, and I want to be able to edit only one part. All you'd have to do is hold down the Control or Command key and double click, and at that point, or just Shift double click, and then you could just, so let's say do this. I have these. Let me get my modifier key right. Yeah, so if you Shift double click, or I'm sorry, Command or Control, my apologies, and double click on the name, then that's the one that shows up. So I could just come here and double click and see only those particular events. So that's an easy way of doing that. Okay. All right, so we see a question. Hello, Greg. I believe you use a UR28M interface. Do you know how to set it up for use for 5.1 setup? How do I enter the mode? Thanks. So once you go, because I don't currently use a UR28M. I did for a while, but what happens is you have 3 stereo outs, and they could function. And then there's 2 different modes. I think the mode, where you could treat them as 3 kind of discrete stereo outs, or they could be combined so that you have left, right, left surround, right surround, center, LFE for doing like a 5.1 output. And there's like different modes for the outputs. And if memory serves right, you want it to be on independent mode. And you would do that within kind of the control panel for the UR28M. So as soon as you go to the UR28M, you'd see like just the control panel, like the little software mixer, and you would see kind of the output mode. I'm pretty sure you want to set that to independent, and then it could send to all 6 outputs simultaneously for a 5.1 monitoring scenario. All right. All right, so we have a question. If I draw a series of legato notes in a MIDI track and output that to an external synth via USB or MIDI out of MIDI keyboard, some of the notes are triggered, whereas some random notes are not triggered. The random notes change every cycle. If I shorten the notes by 10 ticks, all the notes are triggered as expected. Do you know what the problem is? I've tried 2 different synths, different MIDI cables, and the result is the same. So if we're working with MIDI, and let's say we drew MIDI notes in, and we have notes that are kind of overlapping. So we come and let's say, okay, now I want to, draw, let's say I have different MIDI notes here, and these notes are kind of on top of each other. So how MIDI works is you can, if we play this, we may see like a note on, depending on what is taking the priority. So, but we can't, in MIDI, you can't have a note on and a MIDI note respond to note on and note off. It's kind of binary. It's on or it's off. It's on or it's off. So depending upon the state of what is actively selected when you go into the MIDI, at that point it may choose which events are on, or which note layer on top of it is on or off. So when you separate the notes by like 10 milliseconds, then it's going to be able to re-trigger the note. But you can't play the same MIDI note twice. It's just kind of how MIDI works. It's like if you were typing on a keyboard, let's say you're typing on a typewriter and you hit 2 or 3 keys, they don't all show up at the same point. If you're typing in, like naming a particular parameter, so let's say we go to our project notepad and I hit 3 keys on my keyboard at the same time, it doesn't hit those letters all I typed these characters at the same time, but it has to be on or off, but not stacked on top of each other. So with MIDI, make sure that you're not, if you had to have overlapping stuff, you may have to just simply have 2 tracks assigned to the same sound. But on the same MIDI channel, a note can't be on and off at the same time. All right, so we see, hi Greg, we shall try set up, okay, so we just see, can Greg discuss and share your experience to get a successful setup for live recording gig? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's say I was doing a live recording. So I'll come here, want to do like a multi-track live. So often what I do is, let's say, okay, we want to do 16 tracks. Okay, and what I'm going to do is to come over and set this up, and we will right click, and I'm going to put these into a folder. So we'll say move selected tracks to new folder. Now when I do a new folder, what this allows me to do is, instead of arming or monitoring each track, I can just come over here and monitor, click record enable on the folder itself. So that way I don't have to go through all of my tracks. Sometimes you may want to create a duplicate. The last thing you want to do after a live recording, and I remember doing this, I was involved with the Eric Clapton project that we did in Texas about 19 years ago now, that people want an immediate backup. So one of the things you could do here is right click and say I want to duplicate this folder track, but these tracks I want to record to a different drive. So we could right click on these and we'll say there's set record folder. So I would put these to a different drive, and this way you have a backup. So you could have this for maybe this folder for your internal drive, and maybe an external USB drive for these tracks. And we see, is it possible to get an automatic recovery after an interrupted recording because of real-time issue message? So if you're recording and your computer just completely lost power, let's say you had a power outage and you didn't have, it wasn't a laptop that was working on battery, the audio file would be intact until Cubase stopped recording. Now there's another function that a lot of people aren't aware of that's super handy for live recording, is when we take a particular track, let's say we're recording, there's always the possibility that someone could come over and say, oh yeah, that's cool, and just hit a button and you accidentally pop out of record. Now there's a mode that we could activate, and I think it's called record lock. So I may have set it up on my MIDI remote here. So let's say I jump to my MIDI remote, and I think it's maybe this. So if we go to just search, and there's keyboard shortcuts for this, and you could say lock record, unlock record. All right, so I think that this button on my MIDI remote I have set for lock record, and then the one below it, unlock record. So let's say we're recording, and maybe you're doing this from the stage or someone else is doing it, and there's people that have been drinking or whatever. So we could hit record, then I'm going to hit the lock record button, and now if I tried to stop the recording, or if I tried to punch out, let's say if I hit stop, we'll see, oh, do you want to continue recording? We'll say continue. So it will continue to record regardless of what people are doing. This is kind of a fail-safe method. And then at that point, you could hit unlock record when you're done. And now you could pop out, and that could be the end. So if you want kind of a safety setting so that, someone goes up and starts, trying to send an email to someone while you're recording because they see a laptop, you could put it into lock record, and that will continue to play on. So you see, is it possible to set all tracks in record mode, i.e. easy to forget one track or macro? So again, once you have it set in a folder, we could think of just all the tracks that are in that folder will be set. So we'll follow the record enable and monitor enable for that particular setting. All right, and we have a third question on this input level. I think I've heard from you saying it's a good idea to have a VCA fader to control all inputs tracks because the band, after a while, increased the loudness. So it's kind of the inevitability. I remember I did an Alan Parsons project recording once for him. at a NAMM show and for a concert at the Grove at Anaheim. And one of the things that I do that I kind of learned is, because the band will say, this is as loud as we're going to play. And you're like, oh, great. And you set kind of your input level. So I'm going to just come over here. Let's say we're going to add, we're tracking 16 tracks. We have 16 inputs. I often go to the mix console and we'll select all of the input channels and then I link them. So we're going to say, I'm going to just link. It could be just the volume. Now, let's say as they're recording, between songs, what I do if it gets a little crazy and the levels are creeping up, I would just, very subtly, maybe between a song, bring down one of the faders. And this way, this could make sure that you're not, going to be clipping the signal during recording. I've been in many live recording scenarios where, I'm sitting next to front of house and I can't monitor what I'm doing. So I'm looking constantly at my input levels. And if I need to adjust the gain accordingly, we could just do it and move one of the faders. And even if you do just very subtle, like use your mouse scroll wheel and say, it's starting to creep up. So that song was looking a little bad. So the next one, I'm just going to take the levels down and use your mouse scroll wheel to kind of change the input gain. So I'm not sure if the input levels can be set to a VCA, but if you link them together, then at that point you could control the different levels. All right, let me go back. I think that's all of our live questions. Okay, so one more question. Says, I'm back to writing mode. I was calling up some loops and samples, innuendo, and now certain ones are missing. Is there any way to rescan or reset? All right, so if you have to do this in Media Bay, find the ones that are missing, and let's go to your Media Bay, not your pool, and go to your VST sound on the left-hand side. And as we go to your VST sound, we can now come over and we say, I'm not seeing this, my hard knock sample. So select the folder here, right-click, and choose to rescan disk, and that will go through and rescan all of the different content for the samples to be there. And that will make the link to the Media Bay again. All right, so with that, I think we're just about out of time. We'll be back on Friday, so the 17th, I guess. We're starting at 1 p.m. U.S. Eastern Time. I want to thank everyone for spending part of your morning, evening, afternoon learning more about Cubase and figuring out how to be a better Cubase user. And if you have questions that you want to send in advance, you could send them to clubcubase@steinberg.de. I'm just really grateful for, to be a part of such a wonderful community, and I look forward to helping out and answering more questions in the future. I want everyone to please stay safe and healthy, and we will see you back on Friday. Take care. Goodbye.